Welcome back, everybody. This is the 8th class, and we are past the halfway point. So, first half was talking about giving you sort of an idea of what this work is, what's giving you some categories of how to deal with your body and like how to like kind of think about your body and see what it is. And finally, now we're going to start entering a section, which is, I think, I don't know if it's explicit here, but these verses are essentially meditation verses, which is when you're meditating, you could read one of these verses, and it gives you like a framework to think about what to think about, or like it would present an idea, and then you're trying to see in your meditation if this idea is true or not. So that's kind of how I like to think about it. So we're on verse 35. So last week we just started to touch upon what you are, what are some of the qualities of yourself. So we started by saying things like, I am attributeless, I am actionless. So we're trying to see that all qualities that we see in this world, things like physical qualities, mental qualities, they are all qualities of something other than you. So who you are, the witness, the awareness that is sort of illumining all of this, that is attributeless, it's actionless, it's formless because it has no form. Anything that has a form is, a physical object or a mental object. So you kind of have to think of it from that standpoint. And you're never going to see yourself as an object because, you are that which is seeing stuff. So just like how you're never going to see your own eye, you're never going to, taste your own tongue, you're never going to touch your own skin, things like that. You're never going to see yourself or, be aware of yourself externally. You are by which things are illumined. So you're sort of the instrument of this entire world that you're perceiving. Cool. So like we're getting into those ideas, and we're going to continue along along that path. So I'm going to share my screen, and let's continue with the book. Stop one. All right. Can folks see my screen? Perfect. Cool. So does anyone want to volunteer doing the Sanskrit?
I'll go for it, Puru.
Perfect. So verse 35, Varun.
Yeah. Aham akashavat sarvam bahihi antargata achyuta sada sarvasam shuddha nistange nirmala achalaha.
Brilliant. Does anyone want to do the English? Jayesh? Sure, go for it.
Like the space, I feel all things within and without, changeless and the same in all the times. I am pure, unattached, stainless, and motionless.
So again, here we're given this sort of idea that like, what are you? So like when you're thinking about I, we talked about the qualities of I, which is, existence, consciousness, bliss. So that's like the sort of the qualities. But, when we are thinking about who am I, what am I, am I this mind, am I this body? If I'm not those things, then what am I? So these are some ideas that come to mind, or like these are given to you, which you are supposed to take in your own meditation and see if this is true or not. So the first idea here is, like the space, I fill all things within and without. So remember we spoke about like cup space, or we spoke about a cup. A cup has space inside and then space outside. And when you're moving the cup, it appears that the cup space is moving. And there's somehow this outer space in which this this outer space is somehow different than the space inside of this cup. But actually that is not true, right? The fact is that the cup is in space, and the space inside the cup is the same space that is outside the cup. It's not like they're different. It just appears that they're different because of this sort of limiting boundary of this cup. So similarly, there is something within you which is like that space, which is this divine, spark of life, which is, causing this body to be alive, which is illuminating this entire world for you. And the same spark is in me, it's in you, it's in everybody else. So everybody has that space or that spark, and because of which, if you close your eyes, for example, you can imagine, things. You can imagine like a mango. You can imagine a strawberry, and it feels like there is this mental space within you as well, right? Just like there is this space outside in which things appear. In fact, there is a mental space as well. And what this verse is kind of saying is that that space is the same as the space outside. So, there is no inside. Technically, there is no inside and there is no outside. So if this body kind of, if there's no limiting body, you're bound. Right now, there is this sense of boundary that I am just this physical body and limited to this body. When that boundary kind of dissolves, then the space kind of, you see that the space in you is the space outside, and then there is no end to where you are. Where, just like you cannot say where space ends, right? Like space is infinite. You can go beyond the last point that you think is the end of space, and then you can go to the last point. So you can keep expanding. So you're sort of like that. You're like space, which fills all things. Space fills everything. So that's kind of this idea here. And then changeless is, there's something within you that's not changing. Change only appears to objects that in your awareness. So your thoughts are changing, your emotions are changing, physical objects which you're seeing are changing. Those are all, so change is a quality of something limited, right? So change, what does change mean? It means that there is an aspect of, birth and death happening. So, your body, for example, you had a child's body when you were much younger, and now you have an adult body. So that there's been a death of the child's body, and now you have an adult body. So whenever we think of change, there's always a sense of time, sort of birth, some sort of existence, some sort of decay, and then eventually death. So that's kind of how we want to think of change. So, but there's something within you which is changeless. So, there is this sort of feeling where, as you kind of get older, you start to think that, you can start to feel that your body is somehow getting older, but there's something within you that feels as young as, when you were a teenager, right? There's some sort of something within you that feels ageless. And that something within you is, and that is ageless, and that is birthless, and that is deathless. So it is changeless. So whenever something is changeless, the aspect of birth, death, and decay are gone, right? Because those are the things that cause change, birth and death. And essentially decay actually causes change. But if you do not decay, if there's something within you that does not decay, it is then changeless. And it's the same at all times. That's why there is this feeling that, when you, even, I say, like, my teacher says that when, he's fairly old, he's like in his 70s. And, but if he is still, and if he doesn't move, it almost feels, and his body obviously hurts given that he's kind of old and stuff. But if he stays still and he doesn't move, it almost feels like he's back when he was 18, the feeling that, when he's young, because the pain and all of that kind of is only limited to the body. And if that is put on the side, this feeling of you and this feeling of I-ness has no age, because it never changes. The same I-ness that was there when you were a toddler is the same I-ness that you had when you were a teenager, the same I-ness when you had when you were a young adult, and now the same I-ness that you have in this moment. So that I-ness is constantly shining, and it's illuminating all the changes in the mental world, in the physical world. So that is always unchanged, that I-ness. And you will see that. If you start to pay attention to it, it's not something that you will gain. It's just that it's always been like that. It's just that we haven't noticed it. So, so at all times, it is the same. And then I am pure. So now we're given sort of this meditation verse, which is, all qualities. So purity here does not mean good or bad. It just means that there is this no otherness, like in the quality of it. So, when we talk about pure water, for example, it's only pure water when there's nothing other than water in what you are seeing, right? So pure gold is also the same. If there's any other thing other than gold, then you can say that it has some impurities. So in yourself, that there is only I there, like everything is just you. And in that sort of pure awareness, in that awareness, there are, thoughts and physical objects, all of that. But if our attention to those things is withdrawn, there comes a moment like in our day-to-day when we are so focused on a job, on some project, or you're focused on reading a book, or you're focused on watching some movie, that you kind of forget this entire world, right? And we have this feeling that we are so tuned in to like one task. So our mind is essentially single pointed in those moments, very focused, very concentrated, which is why concentration is one of the practices that is presented when you're trying to just build a mind that can just focus on one thing. Because what that does is that when you just focus on one thought or one activity, your entire world disappears. And because your entire world other than what you're doing disappears, all your pain and your suffering and all of that is just gone for moments, which is why when you're doing adventure sports and stuff, it feels so fun, because when you're doing those things, you have to pay full attention to the activity, and everything else is gone. So when one of the things that we see in this work is that a single pointed mind is as good as no mind. So we want to get to a place where our minds can be focused on a single thing. It doesn't matter what it is. It could be washing, dishes. It could be, doing a project at work. It could be just singing, whatever it is. But you just want to give your entire attention to this one thing that you're trying to do. And when you start to do that, you will see that anything can become blissful, because bliss is your nature. And because that's your nature, if your mind is kind of, I would say it does not have too many vibrations, and vibrations here means you're thinking of a bunch of things simultaneously. If you're thinking of just one thing, then your mind is kind of stable because you're giving entire attention. There's no fluctuation of energy going here and there. You're just focused on this one thing. And if you can get there, you will start to see that anything you do can become blissful, including things that you hate, in fact. And I hate doing laundry, for example. But if you can practice doing this thing while you're doing things you dislike, which is just give it single pointed attention, even that task can become blissful. And this is a practice that you can try on your own. And so from that standpoint, when you're doing things from a single pointed attention, you will see that you are pure, because there's nothing else that is being illumined other than just what is in front of you. And you will, these are just ideas and language that we're trying to describe our, the experience, and language will always fall short to the real experience. But, when you read these verses, it's not just about trying to think about, oh, it is pure or it is unattached. These are words that are, trying to describe an experience. And we want to see that when we are having this experience, can I relate to these ideas? That is the purpose of this verse. So it's like a meditation verse, which is, I'm unattached. What does that mean? It's not, we can try to first intellectually understand it, but, the real direct experience will make this obvious. And that's where we want to get to. So unattached here is that, whatever is happening around me, I am a witness to it. I'm untouched. So, the example that I love to think about is, when I'm looking at stuff, I'm looking at diverse things. I could be looking at a beautiful mountain. I could be looking at a raging fire. I could be looking at a very graphic thing that I dislike. But the eye is never touched by it. The eye is only, it's like purpose is to just, let you have the experience of sight. And whatever you see, if it's a very pleasant sight or a very disturbing sight, the eye is untouched. It's only the mind which will have a sort of observation or a thought about what it is seeing, and it'll say, okay, I like this or I don't like this. But the eye is never, eye here meaning the physical eye, is never touched by what it is seeing. Similarly, the I, the letter I, who I am, is untouched by what I'm perceiving. The body may be touched, the mind may be touched, but I am untouched. And if you can see that there is always a distance between you and the mind and the body, then you can get to play with how you feel about things. So, your reactions don't necessarily have to become compulsive to situations outside. So let's say something, your boss yells at you, for example, you may feel angry about it, but that anger does not necessarily have to translate into an unconscious action. You can then use that anger and sort of use that energy to do something which is more beneficial in that situation, rather than just having an outburst about some sort of a reaction. So that's kind of the idea. And the next idea here is stainless and motionless is this sort of the same idea that, since you are the witness, it is untouched by any dirt that is, limited to the mind or the body. And motionless is because, that feeling of I that never moves, really. What moves is like thoughts, your physical objects, those are the things that are moving by. But you, if you are, that's why when we practice meditation when we're sitting still, because we can see that when we are very still, there are thoughts that have velocity of moving. You, that is the witness or the witnessing awareness that we are, is still all the time. And within that stillness, there appears to be movement. There's, appears to be movement of thought, appears to be movement of this physical world around you, but you are still and motionless. And that's kind of how we want to think about this. And this is not something to, just talk about. It's something to directly experience. This is a meditation verse. And we're going to get more of these verses as we move along. So verses, I think 34 onwards. So like the previous verse that we did last class, this verse and the next verse, all of them are meditation verses. So let's do the next verse. Does anyone have any questions about this one? Okay. So who was doing the Sanskrit? Was it Varun? So Varun, one thing I could tell you about it, so all of this is, the verses have a meter. So you can technically, sort of like chant it or sing it in a way. So the meter here is na 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 na. Sorry, na 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 na. Actually, no, that's not the meter.
Let me try.
So it's like 8 by 8. So maybe that'll help.
Sure. Nitya Shuddha Vimuktaikam Akhandananda Nandyayam Satyam Jnanam Anantam Yat Param Brahmaham Evatat.
Amazing. Yep, you got it.
I am verily that supreme Brahman, which is eternal, pure, ever liberated, one, indivisible, blissful, non-dual truth, and of the nature of existence, knowledge, infinite.
Okay, so again here we're getting another meditation verse, which is, I am that supreme Brahman, and here Brahman is, we've sort of gotten a new word now. I think we got introduced to this last class, where Brahman is this universal consciousness. Atman was this individual sense of consciousness that's within you. So, you can say, I am, I have a subjective awareness, you have that subjective awareness, but that subjective awareness is the same awareness that you have and I have. It's the same. What we perceive is different, based on our conditionings and all of that. How I look at something will be very different than how you look at something. So that's objects about how we perceive this world. But the instrument through which we perceive that, which is the I, which is the Atman, is the same. And and sort of extrapolating that, we get this word which is Brahman, which is universal consciousness. So this Brahman, you can think of it as like before the Big Bang, there was nothing, but there was Brahman. So there's just this mass of consciousness. There was absolutely no objects even there. There was no time. There was nothing. There was just this consciousness, pure consciousness. And from that pure consciousness came all of this. And it's not that, consciousness changed and now it has become, a human being or a planet or a rock. It's more like the form has changed. So you can think of I think the clearest example that we use in this work is, the pot and the clay, or the gold or the ornament. So you can think of, clay is the material cause. So there's a lot of, so let's imagine a world where there was only clay, there was nothing else. So using the clay, you can mold and create a plate. You can mold it and you can create a cup. You can mold it and create a vase. You can mold it and create like a bottle. You can do all these things. And they appear and the form changes. So now clay becomes a bottle. Now clay becomes a plate. A clay becomes a cup. So the material cause for all those objects is clay. Even though you can say this is a bottle, but actually it's not. If it's made out of clay, it's not. We just say it's a bottle for convenience, right? So we use words and we give names to objects for language, so that we can easily communicate about what we are seeing. But actually, the reality of the bottle is that it is clay, or the reality of the clay cup is that it's clay. So similarly, even though all of this appears as different, and you can say this is a door, this is a window, or this is a wall, this is a tree. These are all play of words that we can say, what we use to communicate. But it is nothing but this consciousness appearing as all these other objects. So all of this becomes extremely easy to understand if we go into our dream world. So we all have a dream experience when we go to sleep, or at least most people who dream. And in that experience, we create an entire world. We have so let's stay. So did anybody dream last night or this week? Jayesh, you did? You want to share what you dreamt?
Yeah.
If it's not too raunchy.
No. Yeah. So it was actually a friend's Eid party. Like I hadn't been to the party, but
Okay.
my friends are all caught up, and I saw a bunch of pictures of those. And funnily enough, in my head, the scene was recreated, and I was a
Okay.
part of it. So I wasn't.
So in your dream world, you had created, external world. So you were like in a friend's house or something,
Yes.
right? So there was a friend's house, and then you had external people. So you had you had like friends. So you had
Yes.
relationships, and then did you feel certain emotions to those friends in your dream?
Absolutely. Yes.
So you had real emotions. Did you also have a physical body, or were you in somebody else's body?
I actually never saw myself.
Okay, so you never saw yourself, but you definitely experienced that you had perceiving this
I
world
was there. Yes.
just like you were perceiving this physical world. So you were perceiving your
Absolutely.
dream world,
Yes.
and now you had emotions, you had conversations potentially. Maybe you ate some food, some biryani.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
so right, so this is your entire experience, and
Yes.
um, so now when we look at that experience, was that world real?
I can't tell the difference. It felt real.
Right, so it feels real.
Yeah.
You cannot say that it, but when you woke up, can you take that, can you have that conversation with your friend in that dream? Can you actually go and call them and, have that conversation? Like,
No.
so there is this feeling that it was real, but there's also this realization that it actually wasn't that real, right?
Correct.
So it appears as real, but actually it wasn't. So we certainly experience the dream, we certainly take part in the dream, we certainly have all these emotions that happen in the dream, and while you're experiencing the dream, they certainly feel real. But upon awakening, that entire experience kind of is dissolved, like it kind of goes back into wherever it came from, right? So when we start to think about where did it actually come from, like, so what was the material cause of your dream? Did you have to eat a lot of food to kind of produce that dream before sleeping? Did you have to call your friends to, like, have that dream? Did you have to keep some people hidden in your closet that would appear in your dream? So all of that was created from your mind, right? In the sense, the material cause of your dream was your mind. So remember, like I said, in every experience there's three things. There is a subject, there is an object, and then there is an instrument that is sort of connecting the subject and the object. So in this case, what was the object? It was like your dream world, but it was you, because that world was nothing but a figment of your mind. And the subject was you experiencing that dream world. And then the instrument by which you were experiencing that world was also you. So in that experience, even though it appeared diverse and different and many people were there were a bunch of emotions which were all separate. Like maybe other people had some emotions as well, but they were all just purely created by you. So you were experiencing yourself in your dream. That was kind of what was going on. And that's the microscopic explanation of your dream world. And that could, the same experience I go through every night when I sleep, same experience somebody else goes through when they sleep. And then that's a microscopic view, but when we macroscopically expand this is also like that. Except
Yes.
the difference is that this is not my personal dream. When I
Yes.
go to sleep every night, I can say I'm the god of my dream. Whatever I think, that happens, right? And some people can have lucid dreams where you can kind of control your dream. You can start to, like, modify your dream. But this is not my personal dream. This entire dream that is going on here, I certainly have some power to change aspects of it, but it's not my dream. I can do a little bit of dream shaping, right? That would determine, like, how much ever energy I put into something that I want to create. I can create those things in this world as well. Just like if I want to change something in my personal dream, I can. And so I can do that here as well. So the way we want to think about this is that even this entire universe is this made out of pure consciousness, which is appearing as different objects, different things, diverse. Uh, um, but in fact, it is nothing but Brahman, which is the word we use to say to indicate pure consciousness. Which is why we call this work non-duality and not oneness. And the reason being, non-dual is respecting our experience, and which is that I experience something else. So there's always this sense of duality in our day-to-day experience, that I am separate and this is something else. I'm having an interaction, I'm having an exchange right now, or a transaction. For that, there's always a subject, an object, and there's these other things. But in fact, it is saying it is, even though it is, it feels like duality, it is non-duality. So it's not two. And that's kind of how we want to think about it. Okay, so the next idea here is that, so again, we're getting the same sort of words here. So it is eternal. So eternal is something that does not change. It's always there. So from this supreme consciousness came this entire universe. It is there for some time, and at some point that will also go. So the way this work describes this universe is that it gets created, and then at some point it goes through a dissolution and goes back into pure consciousness, and from that pure consciousness another universe gets created and it goes back. So that's kind of how we can see that that's a subjective experience in our world, which is, I have certain ideas, I imagine an idea, that I put some energy into that idea, it maybe manifests in this physical world, and then after some time, due to lack of energy, it automatically decays and that idea is gone. So you can think of, let's say you want to start a company, an idea about that company is born in your head, right? And then if it is a very strong idea, you will put some energy towards it, and then that energy will manifest it in this physical world. This physical world will, you'll have to do a lot of cooperation with people, because it's not just your dream, it's somebody else's dream too. So a lot of cooperation is needed for this idea to be sustained. So, there's energy. At some point, you'll be like, okay, this was pretty fun. Now I'm bored. I want to do something else. And then, because of your lack of, maintaining that thing, it's going to automatically start to decay. And then when it decays, it's gone. So, where did your company go when it closed? It's gone, right? It was there for some time. Now it's gone. So that's like how we think. If you think of any idea in your world, any experience, any relationship which is no longer true right now, you will see that it has these same characteristics, which is it appears, exists for a while, and it is gone. But there is something within you that is eternal, which does not change, which is not subject to any change, which is, the word you're using here is pure again. It is pure because, impurity is only things outside. You are pure, ever liberated, which means that you're all that I is always free. What is bound is the mind. And we're talking about liberation here, and we want to be very clear about what is being liberated. So liberation occurs to the mind because it is the mind that thinks it is bound. So the eye is always shining and it is blissful. It's untouched, which is why it's called self-realization. It is not self-attainment. You don't attain something, because if you can attain something, if you gain something through like effort, you can lose it as well. So it cannot be perfect if it is something that can be lost, or if it is something that requires a lot of energy to maintain, right? Because then you may not have the energy, and then what? So it can only be perfect if it is something that is already there. And we're going to start to, maybe I think in a couple of verses down, we'll start to see how this is actually true. But that's how we want to think about it, which is it is already there within you. And we have not taken the time to notice it. And, I like to think of it as like, you're really thirsty and you're trying to dig the ground to get some water because you're very thirsty, not realizing that there's a river flowing by right behind you. And all you have to do is turn and see that there's this river behind you. So, and that river has always been there. And you just have to look. So, so ever liberated, one. So, so it's one because it is not two, it is one. Even though it appears as two, it is not two. Indivisible, because division is something that creates otherness. So you can only can you divide? So let's say there's only clay. If you take a large piece of clay and divide it into two pieces of clay, they're still clay, even though it may appear as two different pieces of clay. But it's in the end, it is still clay. So what will happen is like your eye of wisdom will open up, and you will start to perceive that this entire world is nothing but consciousness, appearing as all of this diversity. So, there's this Hindu sort of story of like when Shiva, who is the lord of, I guess, death, when his eye opens, this entire universe is destroyed, right? And everyone's like, oh, I should be very like, careful with Shiva and stuff. But it's actually a more subtler meaning. Like when it's not like because of his anger, the world is destroyed and it becomes ashes. What is saying is that because his eye of wisdom has opened, just like how when your eye of wisdom opens, you will see that this world, even though it is diverse and different and full of plurality, it is nothing but one. So, once you see that, then your world is technically destroyed, because what you thought was like, my relationships or like my family and all these ideas that you had, they were all just ideas. And you will see that they're nothing but consciousness appearing as those things. And once you have that realization, then you will know for certain from a direct experience that you're experiencing nothing but consciousness. It's kind of like the analogy of seeing a mirage in a desert, and you may think that it is water, it is water, it is water, but after you have the realization that it is not water, it's just a reflection, it's heat waves or whatever. Even though you would then continue to see that it is, it looks like water, you will have a deep, you'll never mistake it to be actually water, because you know for a fact it's a reflection. So that's kind of how we want to think about this. And so the next idea is non-dual truth. And so, we kind of spoke about what non-dual here is. And it is a truth because, and with a capital T. So notice that it has a capital T. And usually when things have a capital T or a capital letter, it basically means that it is absolute, which means it cannot change. So again, if it is something is changeless, it can never not be true. It is absolute in all. So every experience that you have is limited because it is subject to time. If it is subject to time, it cannot be absolute. So which is why anything physical in this world is not permanent. All the laws that we have, even like science and all those things are basically limited, what do you call it? Properties of this world. Because, right now we have a sense of certain ideas, and those ideas are constantly changing as our information is constantly modifying how we interpret this world. But there is one thing that is not subject to change, which is this I, which is why it is perfect, because it is always there, always illumining this world. Because whatever you know, or whatever knowledge that you acquire is illumined by this I. So without this I, you will not be able to learn anything new. And whatever new you're learning and is being illumined by this I. So we want to see that this I is the one that is always true in all situations. Wherever you are, that's where this I is. If you are not, then you will not perceive this body or this world. So this I is this constant, conscious, sentient awareness that is there wherever you go with you. And what is the nature of it? It is existence, knowledge, and infinite. And it's infinite because it is everywhere. Wherever you go, there you are. So you get, even if you say, I will go to the deepest part of space, the craziest place where nobody has ventured, but even when you go there will be this I, because like whatever you experience, you cannot experience without this I. And that's kind of how we want to say, that's why it is infinite, because whatever you imagine, this universe is infinite, but in that infinite, you cannot experience that infinity without this I. So this I is there everywhere. Questions about this?
I have a question.
Sure.
How do you meditate upon this idea of eternal or pure? Because, I could read it, but it's not true for me as yet.
Sorry, Sandra, can you repeat the question again?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
So you said these are all meditation verses. But if my experience is not yet that I'm liberated or indivisible, what is the practice to meditate on these ideas? Like, what's a more practical approach?
It's a great question. So let's take one idea here. So when we say something is eternal, so we would just want to take one word here, like eternal. And in our meditation, think about what that means. So make sure you have a complete intellectual understanding of what eternal means. So in this case, eternal is something that doesn't change. So when you're meditating, try to see that whatever I think of, in the form of thoughts, in the form of memories, in the thought of like planning, they are all sort of appearances in my mind, and they are changing. So that's not something that's eternal. So I can say, okay, I'm not my thoughts. because I'm trying to find out what is it that is eternal. And clearly the thoughts are not eternal because they change. Then I can look at my body and I can say, okay, my body is, feels like it's always with me. Does it? But I know for a fact that it is changing. I had a different body when I was a kid, a different body now. So I know body is also changing. I can look at the physical world and I can see physical world is constantly changing, right? There's things like things appearing, things disappearing, ideas being created, ideas being changed. So physical world is also not me, is not eternal. So what is it that is eternal? And then and the idea is that we can only negate things. The process in the beginning is to negate, because right now we have a firm understanding and the firm belief in this concreteness of this world and this identification with this world outside and around us and whatever we're perceiving. And we have to break this identification. Once our attention on the external is sort of diminished, or it's not as much as it is, then we can start to get more, our attention can turn towards the source from which all of this is being illumined. And once we start to get a sense of that, and once we start to turn our attention to that, then this is going to automatically be your experience. It's not even like you have to remember that, oh, it is eternal. You will yourself become, a meditation verse. Like your experience will say that, because you will be speaking out of your own experience. So like if I were to ask you, what is it like to be a woman, Soundarya? Tell me. Would you have to read a book about it? No, right? Because, that is your experience. So that's kind of how we want to think about this. And so this is a process. So the first half of the book was a process of trying to stop paying attention to the external so much. And without that, you can't jump here. So, so if your attention is still a lot on the external, reading this verse may not be as useful, because you want to get to this verse and do this. This is a different practice, which is, trying to stay, turning the mind to the self, and staying there. If your mind can stay there for a while, you will see that it is eternal. But until that happens, like I would say, practice the subject-object discrimination. Stop believing in the reality of what you're perceiving. Once our attention on the external starts to dissipate, automatically our attention will on the self will start to blossom.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Thank you for asking. Any other questions? Okay, let's do the next.
Yeah. Evam nirantarabhyasta brahmaivaasmiti vasana haratya vidya vikshepan rogan iva rasayanam.
The impression I am Brahman, thus created by constant practice, destroys ignorance and the agitations caused by it, just as medicine or rasayana destroys diseases.
So this was a better way to answer your question, Soundarya. It's like you are right on track, which is like, what do I do? How do I practice this? And so this is giving you a practice, which is saying, the impression. So, this book is giving you an idea that you are Brahman, that you are something other than that's an impression. It's a different, which is why this work is like trying to light a fire in your mind. And if your old set of impressions are the sort of wood that are the fuel for the fire, you're given a new impression that you're going to use to light fire to these other impressions. So this is a new impression, which is I am Brahman. I am not the name and form, right? Like, so in the analogy, if you think you're a cup, in the analogy of a clay and the form of whatever the clay thing is. So it could be a cup, it could be a plate, it could be a bowl. So you're not the cup, you're not the bowl, you're not the plate, you are the clay. So the same idea here is that I am Brahman. That's the impression that we want to deepen within us. So if we start to have this firm, so this impression can help you in moments when you get triggered. So for I love to always think of like an analogy of like when you're going to work and your boss criticizes you and says, you did not do this project well. Now in those moments, your ego is hurt and you feel triggered and you feel, you have another thought appears about yourself. Either you think you're worthless, or you think you should have done better or whatever, or you may have another thought, which is like, this boss is an idiot, doesn't know what he's talking about, or doesn't know what she's talking about, right? So you may have these sort of your identification with your mind or this body will appear in that moment. And in those moments, what is our usual tendency? We want to either respond to the boss, prove that no, actually I'm not bad. You start to give an excuse of why this happened, why that happened, trying to defend, protect this sort of identity that we have. So that's our usual response, to protect our identity. If you cannot say something to your boss, you will call your friend and you'll be like, my boss was such an asshole. And you will try to validate your experience and try to get, some sort of justification of why your actions were right. So what is happening in those moments is your identity is getting even more concretized, because now you're associating your identity that you are this employee who is like this and like that, or this boss is your identification with the boss is increasing as well. So in those moments, that's our usual process to kind of fix that feeling. The feeling of like, no, I'm actually pretty smart. My boss is an idiot. So you want to try to protect that sort of identity. Instead, in those moments, it's hard to do, but this is a practice that you have to develop, which is instead in those moments, start to see that this boss is only making a judgment about my work, which is not me, making a judgment about my personality, which is not me, making a judgment about my mind, which is also not me. Certainly an experience in my day-to-day, but it is not me. I am Brahman, the eternal subject. And what this will do, it will start to create a gap between you and your mind. And this doesn't mean that, you don't do, you don't act, you don't try to improve yourself. Maybe your boss's feedback was good, maybe it was wrong. So you can then make a decision about whether you can critically analyze the feedback and see, is that actually true? Is that not true? Is there something to learn from this? Is there something to improve? So what we start to do is we start to become solution oriented and not so much of just being reactionary. So let's say your boss and you don't, are not to, don't get along well, and which is why your boss is constantly doing this. You will start to see that, okay, that is what the issue is, that our personalities are not matching. Then you will start to see, can I do things or can I take actions to fix that? So, because of your identity is no longer to this relationship or to your mind or whatever it is that is being triggered, your actions will then be towards trying to solve problems rather than trying to just find solace, because that's kind of what we try to do. We try to find solace, which is either by complaining or by by distracting ourselves, by let's say you had a shitty day at work. What do we want to do? We want to go at the end of the day and numb our minds by drinking or something, right? That's usually our solutions, but that's never an effective solution, because the problem doesn't go away. We're not dealing with the core of the problem, which is our identification with whatever is being perceived. So in this case, like your relationship with your boss, or like your identity about like you're this employee and you have the skill, whatever it is. So that's so we want to deal with things in this new divine way, which is, I am not this mind. And in every moment we have to see that whatever actions that you do, whatever projects that you do, they may not work out. But if you do your best in those moments, then there's nothing to regret. There's nothing to, I would say, you're always doing your best. And if things don't work out, there's always stuff to learn from it. There's never a question of like, I should have done it better. I should have, because you can only give your 100%. And if you're giving your 100% and if the outcome doesn't work, then, that's fine. You start to live life from a sense of like, giving it all, giving it your best, and it'll either work or it will not work. If there's something to learn from it, you will learn something from it. If there's not, you will try again. So the sense of regret and reflection and like, I wish it was some other way, kind of starts to fade away. And once that starts to happen, then your focus is always in the now. What can I do now? What can I do now? What can I do now? And you become a lot more solution oriented. And this practice that I am Brahman helps create that, because you're no longer identified with your limited ego. And there's never, most of the issues in this world is trying to protect this limited ego. If you realize that you're not this limited ego, then that gives you a lot of freedom. And then, your entire life will transform. The work that you do, the relationships you have, all of it will transform, because there is no ego identification. And everything sort of happens from like a sense of whatever is needed in this moment, like, responding to the moment rather than reacting. So the example here is like, this is like trying to, eat medicine, because that's the antidote to a disease. So, we need to find antidotes to things and not just temporary band-aids. So an antidote is giving up this limited ego personality thing that we hold on to, giving the entire thing up. And you will see that, then that is scary in the beginning, because we think we are only that. If I'm not my personality, then what am I? That's the fear that we all have. But you will see that a personality is just something that you wear. It is a mask. And in moments you can have different personalities. So you're not the same person when you're with your parents. You're not the same person at work. You're not the same person when you're with your partner. You're doing that all the time. But it's just we have this weird idea that we are somehow, our personality. That's this concrete thing. It's not actually. It's a very flexible thing. And then you become more effective, because now you can like wear that appropriate mask in the appropriate time. Any questions about this?
Hi, Puneet. Good morning.
Hey, Priya.
My only question is, we're talking about you can only give 100%, and you shouldn't ever say that I should have done this or I should have done that. How do you sort of differentiate? I mean, some people would say that might be like a justification for doing a poor job on something, or almost like a cop-out for doing. How do you internally sort of figure out, it's kind of a vague question, but how do you internally figure out whether that was truly 100% or
yeah,
what is laziness, I suppose, in this sort of definition or this framework?
Yeah, that's a good question. So what do you think is according to you is a poor job? Like, when would you consider your job as poor?
You're asking me directly?
Yeah.
What was a poor job? Like, let's say for me, it would be, say I forgot something that might have been a necessary part of. So for like, if I'm taking care of a kid, I'll just give a direct example. If I'm taking care of a kid with diabetes, okay, and I refilled all their medications and made sure that they had all of them and all the insurances went through, but I forgot to send them a referral to endocrinology. Okay, that sounds like a pretty shitty job. It wasn't intentional. Was not trying to do anything bad.
Yep.
Or in another case, say I'm working on something education related or something more administrative, and for some reason there's something inside of me that's sending certain emails is really anxiety provoking, and I just procrastinate them to no end.
Yeah.
Both of those sound like shitty jobs.
So in the first case where you forgot to, give them a referral, like you said, it wasn't done consciously, right? Like you just forgot. And, it's not to say that mistakes won't happen, but I think when I'm talking about like not giving 100%, it's like when you're doing something, is your attention fully on the job? Because if your attention is fully on the job, then whatever is your capabilities at that point with that current state, because your physical body may be tired, your mental body may be tired, but in whatever it is, in that moment, you have given it your best. It may be that, because of, you were very tired or whatever it was in that situation, you made a mistake. But you will not regret that. Okay, I would not say you would not, but I would say, because you know that you were 100% in those moments, at least from whatever energy that you had, you gave it your best. And if mistakes happen, like, there's this, you cannot be perfect all the time, and there's no such thing as perfect, right? You can only do your best. And when if you will make some mistakes, and you will now, you forgot to give that referral. So next time you will now remember to give a referral. Right. So now you're thinking about like, what could I have done better in those moments? Because now somebody, let's say, has complained that, oh, I did not get a discount or whatever. Right. And so now you can take that piece of feedback and say, okay, I'm going to try my best again. And now this experience that you were fully present to, which is somebody giving you feedback, has been assimilated in you. And now hopefully when you do the same action again tomorrow, you are going to give them a referral code. Right. So it's like we're always improving. We're not thinking about, the past moment has gone. So you cannot change that fact that that person didn't get the referral. But what you can do is like, now I'm going to give a referral. Like, it's a deep impression. Let's say you were, let's say if it affected you a lot. So now it's the deep impression. So you're going to remember that's it. You have to do this. But my point is that there's nothing is gained by beating yourself up about what you should have done, because that doesn't solve the problem. You can only fix things and learn from your mistakes and apply them so that you become a more, your whatever task that you're doing, you do it in a different way, which is more effective for that in those moments. So you're just learning all the time. So you just become a growth, there's this modern word, which is like, growth mindset, which is, I'm always growing. I'm always trying to improve myself, which is what it is, which is like, you're just staying present and seeing how you're doing things. If they work, you do them, you do what works. So you're doing, let's say you're doing a great job talking to people and like, empathizing with them. So you continue to do that. If there's something that you're not doing well, you look at what about it is not good, and then you improve. And not from a sense of ego standpoint, which is like, I have to somehow, become this great doctor or something. It's more about, in this moment, this task needs to be done. And how do I, in the moment, you're going to do whatever you know. But then let's say it doesn't work out because somebody comes and tells you did a shitty job. What can you learn from that moment, from that situation, rather than like beat yourself up about you should have not done it that way, because you could not have done it any other way, because that's what happened, right?
Okay.
So it's more about like trying to like just learn from every experience and see, is there something, and not from like a grasping sort of way, from a very sort of like objective way of like, okay, this is what happened. This is, if somebody complains and nobody's complaining, that's probably fine, right?
Yeah. No, so you're looking at it very calm and observationally without attaching any, just what you said before, attaching any personal component to it.
Yeah. So like, for example, I love to think of like, when somebody else comes to you for advice, we're very good at like, giving out advice about, oh, you should do it this, you should, because your sense of identity is not there in that situation, right? So let's say your doctor friend comes up to you and says, I did this, this happened. In those moments, we usually tend to be very good at like figuring out what the problem is, what you can do better, right? Because why are we good in those moments to do that? Because our sense of identity isn't corrupting our observation of the situation, right? Because it's not something I did. right? So when you make that mistake, at least when you identify with that mistake, then our ability to see it in an objective way is degraded, because our mind is half thinking about, oh, I should not have done this, or blah blah blah. So what I'm saying is that try to always think of your own actions as somebody else did those actions, because then your sense of identity is not so much on you. It's like, this action has happened, now what can I do about it? So when you think of this situation where you forgot to do this, or like you have to do something else, think of it as somebody else forgot to do this. Now in that situation, what could they have done better? Because it is always that, like, there is action being done by you. It seems like it's being done by you, but it's being done by something else. And if we can try to think of it that way, that will give us some space to try to find solutions. Does that help?
It does. And it's almost like, when I think about it, if there's one problem, say there's one, like you mess up, quote unquote, mess up one time, it almost feels easy to implement that. But say there's something that you continually do wrong, right? And I feel like that's sort of the time that it really starts setting into yourself, when you really start beating yourself up about that it's almost like at a certain point you say, maybe I just cannot fix this. And maybe you even look at this framework and say, maybe this is just how I am, and this is something I need to accept, that this will always be a problem with me. And that's where I sort of struggle, how to use this effectively, and how to use it honestly in that way. Does that question make sense?
Yeah. So you're saying some things you've been, let's say you're trying to get good at something, it's not been working for a really long time, and now you're wondering if that's never going to change, right? Is that
right? Right. Yeah.
So if you want to change, and if it's not working, you have two options, which is acceptance or continuing to put more energy and trying to change it. And if you think acceptance is like a copping out, then you know better than anybody else what your emotion and what your motivation is when you're trying to change, right? If in the back of your mind you feel like you're copping out, that is a feeling, and that is that is true in your experience. So you are the best judge in those moments to know whether it's something that you can work on, or whether it's something you can cop out on, because it is a vasana in the end. So vasana here is that impression of wanting to change, right? It's a deep impression that you want to change it because it's not working out. Sometimes you just have to accept. So that I cannot answer that for you, because those are like very subjective and personal things. But you will have to play with it, and you will have to see, is it worth the suffering that you have by beating yourself up? Is it worth it? And or the other aspect that you can try to do is get to a place where you can keep trying. It depends. I don't know what you have to tell me what exactly it is if you can, but I don't know how much energy it takes to actually try to change it. But if it is something that you can continue to do without attaching sort of feeling of like expectation here, because the expectation is that when you put in some energy, it'll get better, right? Like, or you'll get better at whatever you're trying to change. And if that is not happening, then your expectation is getting thwarted in a way where you're not getting what you want. Like, I'm trying all of this thing and it's not happening but the way I want it to happen. So that is also a cause of a lot of unwanted suffering, which is like we put in a lot of energy to things and then they just don't change because and then that becomes a cause for more suffering, which is like the fact that it didn't change is now a cause of suffering. Already the fact that it's not the way I want it to be is a cause of suffering, but the fact that I tried and it did not work is now another cause of suffering. So we want to be able to see that those things the reflection of it, which is I did something and it didn't work, that doesn't become a cause of suffering, because that can be in our control, which is, in the moment I tried something, it didn't work. That's it. It didn't work. Rather than like, oh, I tried something, why did it not work? And like, I want it to be different. Like, that is sort of mental suffering that we are creating moment to moment after the experience is over. So I don't know. There's no like good answer to it, but I would say, play with it again with this like light of like being aware of what is the motivation to want to change this. And if it is, if there's this feeling of like trying to cop out, then there's something to look at, because then, there's still this sort of holding on to something, which is I'm either too fearful or I'm too, like there's some resistance, like there's like something blocking you. Does that make sense?
It does, actually. Very helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, but there's no right or wrong answer. It's just so subjective, and but sometimes we just have to like accept life for what it is, which is, I tried and it just didn't work, and be okay with that too. And that's fine too, because there's so many other things that you can be happy about. Right? But we tend to focus on one thing which is not working the way we want it to work. Any other questions? Okay, let's do one more before.
Vivikta desha asino virago vijitendriyaha bhavayedekamātmanam tamanantamanantaihi.
Sitting in a solitary place, freeing the mind from desires and controlling the senses, meditate upon the Atman, which is one without a second, with unswerving attention.
Okay, so in this verse, we're getting the teaching of like how to meditate. So in the previous verse, we said, okay, I am Brahman is this impression that we kind of have to think about, but it's not this constant process of just repeating it blindly without actually like, so you want to like also think about it in your, like, practice that impression in your meditation as well. So how do we meditate? We want to sit in a solitary place. Why solitary? Because if it's noisy, we tend to be distracted. So you ideally want to be, you want your meditation space to not be busy. So it needs to be a quiet place. And then second, what do you do after that? You're freeing your mind from desire. So when we close and sit down, are we thinking about what we want to eat? Are we thinking about the things that we want to do after meditation? Are we planning? All these desires start to come up of like, I need to do this, I need to do that, I need to do this. So we want to free ourselves from that. So like put them on the shelf in your meditation. When you're meditating, it's not a place to solve problems. I think a lot of people use meditation as like, I will try to come up with great ideas when I'm meditating. But that is a different kind of meditation, but this is not that kind of meditation. In this meditation, you are trying to see who you are, or you're trying to get close to that. It's not about being creative. It's not about trying to solve problems, not about trying to have ideas, because that is again creating more and more vibrations in your mind. And that's the cause of our ignorance. So instead, we want to free the mind. So if you're seeing thoughts, if you're seeing desires arise, we will not engage with them. You will just see, oh, okay, there is desires appearing, and you will just stay there without having to like try to see how to acquire that desire, what strategies, like, because that's usually what we do, which is when a desire appears, you will start to think about how can I get that thing, so it's like, I want to eat, what am I going to eat for lunch today? And then you'll start to think about what are the different things in the fridge that I can use to cook. So our usual habitual tendency seems to be on how to make those desires come true. Instead, we are not going to do that. We're going to sit and watch the mind. And then controlling the senses, here senses includes the mind as well. So there's, 5 organs of of senses. So, eyes, nose. So you're already doing most of those things as you're sitting with your eyes closed, so you clearly can't see anything, but you have a mind's eye as well. So your mind's eye is also thinking about like, thoughts, memories. So you want to kind of like close that as well and control that a little bit as well. There's sometimes music playing in your head, even though there's no real sound around you. So you want to like try to control that as well. We try to sing it happens to you where this song is stuck in your head, and in meditation, you're only thinking about that song. But instead, we want to like withdraw our attention and just notice that, okay, song is stuck in my head. It will pass as well. Everything passes. It's just that things continue to exist because we're constantly giving it more and more attention. But you'll see that as you stop paying attention to stuff, stop paying attention to the song in your head, stop paying attention to this memory, all of them will eventually just dissipate and they will change. Something else may appear, but that memory or that song will be gone. So once you start to get familiar with this, the Atman, you will start to see that there is this vibrating, pulsing beingness, or this awareness that you are, which is always on, always shining, always sentient. And that is, in this, they're using one without a second. It is it is mass of consciousness. That's what it is. And that in that mass of consciousness, all these things are appearing. And that can only happen when the volume level of your thoughts kind of go down. So the volume level of your thoughts, which is like all your planning, all your thinking, all your problem solving, all of that has to come down. And that can happen, and you have to pay attention. You have to be extremely conscious about what your mind is doing, because it's very easy for your mind to just run away and start to think about what to do today, or start to think about how to have that conversation with that boss, or start to think about whatever it is that you're thinking. So unswerving attention is what is needed. And so we're going to keep paying attention. And this unswerving attention will create your ability to focus as well. Because in the end, concentration is nothing but having control over your mind, which is, if I want to do one thing, I can do only that one thing. And you will see that this will have a transforming effect in the way you work, in the way you do any activity in life. Because if you develop the skill of being able to concentrate, you are performing at 100% capacity for your own self. So you're always on 100%, doing things with unswerving attention, because that's the only thing that is in front of you. And you will see that you will start to get very, very good at whatever job or any project that you take on. So that's the practice. How do we meditate? So if you ever think about what is the meditation I have to do, read verse 38. It's a good description. Cool. Any questions? Damn, we're going much slower than I thought we would, but I guess this is important stuff. So any questions before we meditate? Okay. Cool. Let's meditate then. All right, so everybody sit in a comfortable position. If you're lying down, I would recommend sitting up straight and just start by taking a few breaths, conscious breaths. Try to make them longer. And on the exhale, see if you can just relax into the breath. You can see if you can feel the breath entering your lungs, expanding your chest. And on the exhale, it's being released. This is happening all the time, every moment you're breathing. Maybe gently scan your body while you're breathing to see if you're holding on to any tension. Make sure your head is in line with your neck and your back. So we want to practice this subject-object discrimination. That is the practice, and that's the tool that we use to get in touch with the self. So see if you can get a sense that you are the witness of your world, of your subjective experience of this world. And in that subjective experience, all of this appears. Right now, your eyes are closed. Probably there's no smell around you. So two of your senses are kind of tamed a little bit. Actually, three, you're not even speaking, so or tasting anything. But there may be thoughts appearing. You're hearing my voice, but they're all appearing in this awareness, just kind of like a sky, if you think about it, or like space. In space, where does this sound appear in this space? Doesn't matter, but can you get a sense that there is this location of the sound appearing? Exists for a while, and then it's gone. And then silence. From this silence, another sound appears. We want to see that even thoughts have this same property, that a thought comes up in the form of a memory or in the form of some future planning. It appears for a while and then it goes back into the same source from where it came from, which is this sky of awareness. And in the sky is your body as well. Right now, you're not moving, and you can't feel your body as much as you do when, let's say, you're walking or something. But nonetheless, body is in this awareness. So try to see if you can introvert your attention. And you can notice who or what is it that is illuminating this experience that you're having. See if you can get a sense of this empty sky. It's without qualities. It's tasteless. But it's conscious. It's full of being. Thoughts may appear, but they also appear in this awareness, in the sky. They just kind of float by. So there is this context in which you are having this experience. And that context is you. In you, your world appears. Your thoughts are witnessed. Your emotions are felt. Try to see that there's this context all the time, in every experience. This context is. The content may be different, but the context is the same. It's unchanging. It is pure. And it's untouched by whatever the content is. So you can have a memory that creates emotions like joy, sadness, but the context, which is the sky of awareness, is untouched. Still remains the sky of awareness. And happiness flows by in this context. And then that changes, and then it maybe goes away, and something new appears. Keep building this deep impression that you are the subject. You are the subject. You are the context. You are Brahman. You are the self. You are not the content, which includes your thoughts, which includes your body, includes your mind, includes your emotions. You are the eternal context, the witness, the subject. Keep turning your attention to the context. Keep trying to see what is it or who is it that illumines this entire experience. If you get lost in thought, bring your attention back to the breath, or you can practice this. Remember to practice this neti, or this subject-object discrimination. I am not this. I am not my thoughts. And consciously saying that out in your mind when a memory or a thought comes up gives you that space to not invest more energy into the thought. So you want to use that tool until we can get to a place where our mind is quiet enough to be able to notice the context. So keep remembering. The more you remember, the easier it will be to remember. Slowly bring your attention back to your objective reality. And when you're ready, open your eyes. Okay, so like always, let's end the class with a chant. Share my screen again. Okay. So if you want to join, you can join me, or you can just listen. Yogarato va, Hogarato va, Yogarato va, Hogarato va, Sangarato va, Sangavihina, Sangarato va, Sangavihina, Yasya Brahmani Ramate Chitta, Yasya Brahmani Ramate Chitta, Nandati Nandati Nandatyeva, Nandati Nandati Nandatyeva, Nandati Nandati Nandatyeva. So this is the English for it. So yeah, this was, the practice is going to allow you to enjoy everywhere. We want to be ecstatic human beings that bring joy to this world and create things which are useful and needed in this present time. So, that's where we can all get to. And once we are there, we can enjoy. We've been given this human body and mind to enjoy, and let's try to get there. So that's the end of the class, everybody. Thank you all for joining. And like always, I will hang around for any questions.
Thank you for today, Puneet. See you next week.
Thank you for reading the English.
Pleasure.
Thanks, Puneet. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.